to Conversations with Melissa. Tonight's guest is Ari Tuckman. Our host for that is RenaFi. At RenaFi, we teach about the underlying drivers of our behavior, and that knowledge leads to better decisions, and better decisions lead to an improved quality of life. Visit renafi.com. We'd like to use the Q&A tool for questions, and we'll look to answer the questions as we go. Tonight's conversation is how to actually get things done. And I did want to introduce you, Ari, but it's hard to, there's a lot to say about you. You're a published author. You write stuff geared towards the consumer and adults like myself. You also write books geared towards doctors to help us, towards professionals. You have the most practical advice. People just love your content. And then your last book, it's like ADHD After Dark. I've got one or two questions towards the end about that, but there's a place you come from that's a whole person perspective. And not only that, I've been working with you for a couple of years on the planning committee at the conference. Yeah. And so, you're this esteemed author and also a friend. So I'm a very lucky person. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. No, it's great to be here. Usually conversations with Melissa are about, planning their conference and figuring things out. And I just had this great idea, which usually you had this great idea. And then we're like, okay, cram it in. How are we going to do this? How do we make this work? So yeah, I'm happy to have a different conversation with you.
So how to actually get stuff done. I really like we're not talking experimental. Right. This is where this is rubber to the road kind of conversation. And I know a lot of us really appreciate the being practical. What makes productivity harder for ADHDers versus non-ADHDers? What makes it harder?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, productivity is hard for everybody, in the sense of we know what we should do. The trick is actually doing it. But there's a lot of things in life that this applies to. So things like, exercising, eating vegetables, flossing, right? Like all the boring stuff of life that is important, it's helpful, you should do it, but it's not that fun to do in the moment, right? So that's universal across the board. Now, hopefully, mostly we make ourselves kind of do the things we need to do so we can be productive members of society and all that. But, especially for folks with ADHD, it's even more so a challenge. And I think the reason is, it's like Barclay's famous quote, ADHD is not a disorder of knowing what to do. It's a disorder of doing what you know. So knowing what to do is often the easy part. It's actually doing the right thing at the right time in the right way. That is the trick of it.
Oh, so this is like comedy where timing is everything, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's sort of, it's the genesis of this kind of presentation that I'm going to be giving at the big ADHD conference this year in November in Dallas, but also our conversation, it sort of came out of two things. One is I've had all these, times in session with clients. Like really what I actually do is I actually sit in my office and I meet with clients all day. That's actually like my day job. Then I moonlight on the side doing fun stuff like this. But I had all these conversations where people will say, yeah, I set an alarm, but it doesn't really work, because I just turn the alarm off and then I don't do the thing. Right. And it always strikes me. And it's sort of like, as I thought about it, I was like, no, the alarm did exactly what it was supposed to do. The alarm worked for the task it was supposed to accomplish. The goal of the alarm is to make you aware. Oh, look at that. It's 3:07. I should now go do that thing I'm supposed to do at 3:07. But what it doesn't do is make you actually want to do it. It doesn't make you do it. It just makes you aware this would be a good time to do that thing. So that was kind of like one part, but also I should actually credit Brittany Smith, who is another person on our, the conference planning committee, but she did this really awesome presentation last year at the conference on all these kind of amazing productivity apps and whatnot. And, so she did a really great job of really sort of covering them and strengths and weaknesses and how to think about it and don't make it too complicated and all of that stuff. And it again, it really just sort of like it crystallized for me that having the tools is one thing. The trick of it is actually doing the damn thing, right? That is the thing of productivity. And all the apps and whatnot can be great tools, but they can also actually be their own waste of time, right? Because like, it's easy to spend a lot of time kind of perfecting and color coding and categorizing and setting it up, but that is its own distraction. It just looks more productive than like Candy Crush or something.
Yeah, I mean, you say a lot there, because I've heard folks where they'll get a system, maybe system someone else recommended or they did a course with, and then it stops working well and they go, well, I'm just throwing this whole thing out and I'm going to start from scratch. And that, to me, I mean, I mostly have used whatever my calendar system is, and the idea that I'd have to bring over all the birthdays and all that sounds, that's already daunting to me. But I do hear a lot of people just go, all right, well, this stopped working for me and I'm just going to, whole new system. And that sounds like a tremendous amount of work. But that's common.
I mean, it is. It's definitely, I mean, well, I think there are some folks who get excited. It's like, yeah, this is the thing. I'm going to do this and it's going to be great. I've heard such good things. Look how many stars it got, right? Like, and it's well-intentioned. Like, I'll definitely give them that. But it is a big, like this, as you said, there's a big transition cost. And if you don't actually use it, and if it's not actually better, then you've spent a lot of time kind of for naught. But, the sort of difference is, I don't know, it's sort of, I'll tell two stories here. So way back long ago, when I used to run the adult ADHD support group in Northern Virginia for the CHAD chapter there, we had a guy in the group and he kind of told this story. He's like, yeah, I'd always get stuck kind of messing around on my computer at night. And then I'd get to bed too late. So what I did was I set the lights on a timer, and then the lights would go off. And I was like, bam, there. It's now 11 o'clock. Yeah. And then I got really good at working in the dark. And of course, everybody laughed because they're like, totally, I can appreciate, right? Yes, right? Everybody could relate to that, right? So that's the thing, right? It's like the alarm. It goes off. He was aware, but he wasn't sufficiently motivated. Now, as a contrasting story, Eric Tivers from ADHD Rewired, great guy, told this story where, again, same problem, wouldn't get up to bed on time. So he started setting an alarm, not downstairs where he was, upstairs where his wife and baby son were. And I mentioned his wife, who will kill him when he wakes up his baby son in the middle of the night, right? So like, now he's motivated, like that was the difference between those two examples, right? He had the motivation to actually follow the awareness and do something with it.
What a consequence too, right?
Yes.
It's one thing, that's what's interesting is how much tolerance we have for persevering. Okay, I thought, oh, good, now you're going to have to get up to either turn the light on, right? Or, right, this is an inconvenience. But instead, he got very good working in the dark. But the waking the baby, right, that had real consequences that were intolerable.
Yeah,
also.
exactly.
I mean, that's how I heard what you said. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was. I mean, it was definitely not a price to pay. So it kind of becomes one of those things that, hopefully, though, everything in your life is not avoiding disaster. Like, I mean, it works, right? I'm going to beat you up if you don't do this thing. But the problem is, like, it's not the most motivating way to go through life. Like, averting disaster is not the most motivating way to approach a problem. So, but it is a thing that sometimes, that's helpful. But I think preferably it's more about working towards something good rather than away from something bad.
Right. We're not usually voting against something, right? Where we usually, there's something we want, we're for it, right? So this idea of, our motivation is towards a positive. So this is carrot versus stick, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In the older way of thinking about motivation, right? So that's very interesting.
So that is the question, right? So I think some of it, I think it depends. I mean, some of it is I don't know, it's maybe a bit sort of squishy, but it's sort of like, you know, what kind of a person do I want to be? Like, how do I want to see myself? Do I want to see myself as the kind of person who does the things that, you know, they need to do, even when it's not that convenient? Or maybe nobody else will know I procrastinated on this thing, but I will know. And I don't want to deal with that. Or I don't want to go into that thing not feeling prepared. Or I don't want to yet again feel like I'm throwing it together at the last minute.
Yeah.
You know, so some of it is that, and that's kind of bigger and it's deeper and it's not easy, you know, but I think in the end, that is the big thing of it. I think sometimes I kind of use the phrase bringing the future into the present. So here I am now, here's this thing I don't feel like doing, but it's probably a good idea. How will I feel about this later, in an hour, tonight, tomorrow, next week, next month, you know, what, depending on what we're talking about, right? How will I feel in that moment, right? Which is a much better question to ask yourself than, do I feel like doing this now? Because the answer will never be yes, right? And by the way, 20 minutes before it's due, you'll still say, no, I don't want to do this now, but I don't have a choice. I have to. So like, don't ask yourself the wrong question.